just on my topic of it was kind of, all these big debate shows where people that I would say 4 years ago were to some degree not, they weren't, it's like, you're not to be debated, they're to be like ignored.
Sure.
Like you're supposed to just keep them on the ffringes. They had to like admit that they're not. So now it's just, that's the mainstream is just accepted these people are there now, whether that be Jordan Peterson or, whoever it is.
Sure.
And I thought that was interesting when Tim Dillon went on CNN.
I know.
And they did the hour debate, and he sort of bullied them into posting it because they were just going to post clips, and he talked about it on big platforms, so they have to post it and
they
sort
have
of
to
force
post
their
it.
hand.
I mean, it did more views than anything they've ever posted on their YouTube
Yeah, it did
channel.
crazy views.
Yeah, it's like over 1 million views.
But it was... There was probably lots of interesting things.
I actually did not like how little he talked shit specifically about CNN because there were so many times.
Oh, you think he should have?
Well, there were so many times. I guess he was being polite, but there were so many times when she would be like, "Yeah, it's like the mainstream media does this." He's like, "Yeah, you guys did this specifically." Like when he's talking about well, why do people distrust the mainstream media? It's like because you guys have been lying nonstop for the last decade or more.
Yeah,
and it's fucking chickens are coming home to roost here.
There is two certain personalities though. I think there's one personality that's they go on things and talk to people as if they were talking to someone at a bar. Does that girl not remind you of 100 people we know? Right?
For sure. Yeah.
If you were at a comedy club chatting with her, that's not true. If you might pull that. Yeah, you might be like, you mean you? Yeah. But that's friendly still, too.
Yeah, of course. You'd be ribbon. But I mean, it's just, she's...
I don't know. It depends, but...
She seemed...
But their big thing is the underlying thing for news organizations that they have a really hard time understanding about podcasts, and they're just well, don't you think they'll go in the wrong direction? Blah, blah. They have, what if your fans think this?
They have a very clear sense of what's right and wrong.
Right, but the more important thing is they don't understand the appeal of your word. You go, what if your fans think this? You go, yeah, I don't give a shit because I'm not selling something.
Right.
And
I'm not selling fucking farm ads.
Right.
So I don't have a safe
or selling a viewpoint.
Yeah.
But there's so many people where they go, there's kind of a, the idea that people that are trying to get power have a harder time getting power because it's their motivations are obvious.
Sure.
Whereas some people that are just hey, I'm just saying what I think.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling you what you have to do.
No.
And I might tell advice the way that I tell a friend or tell this, but you go, they have and people are very sensitive to being sold something, right?
Yeah.
It's when you
they
watch
know when they're being sold something.
Yeah, it's
you can feel it.
People can feel it. That's why, sometimes the industry has a hard time manufacturing plants as much as people say they do manufacture them. And people actually, I kind of see it as even in, high school or even after that, or in life, but everything's kind of the most in high school. People aren't convinced of viewpoints. They more see people that they think are cool.
Yeah.
And then kind of okay, or at least hear them out because they're oh, that guy's life seems to be working. What does he think on that? And you I sort of have a respect for this person.
Yeah.
So I take their viewpoint into account.
Or you just like them.
Or if you just
cool,
like them,
cool and
you like their
forming
cool
your identity.
Yeah, how many people think a band is cool and then they take on all their opinions.
Yeah,
they're they didn't convince you of those opinions. You just saw a guy and you're oh, that guy seems sick.
For sure.
And then you go, what does he think on this? You're well, he's sick, so
he's sick,
that sounds right.
Yep, correct.
Yeah, but that comes from not caring. There's even going back to seduction shit. It was so many dudes that don't care if they smash or not are better at smashing the girl.
Of course.
And people always go, well, how do you pretend you don't care? It's you don't pretend you don't care. You actually don't care.
Yeah, you have to not care.
You actually have to not care. It's but I think it's the same. It reminded me of that conversation where people are well, how do you pretend that you don't give a shit so you can actually, but you do actually give a shit and then you can get what you want? You're no. You're missing the point where you actually aren't selling something.
Yeah, I don't give a shit. I don't care. I'm just I do a fucking podcast on the internet because I was forced to, essentially, because well,
you have a lot of opinions, especially if you're you're in comedy, you have a lot of opinions on things.
Yeah, and her whole thing,
and if you have a viewpoint and a perspective, but you're just not telling people they have to have it.
Yeah, I know. Her whole thing too was so stupid. She's why are there no left-wing comedians? You're what the fuck are you talking about?
Are you mental?
You're first off 10 years ago there was 3 right-wing comedians.
And they were all on the Larry
Dennis
Cable Guy
tour.
tour.
Yeah, it was Larry the Cable Guy, fucking Bill Engvall, Jeff Foxworthy, and Dennis Miller. And Tim Allen. Man.
I think a centrist
There was
person
literally
with
a handful of right-wing comedians. like that would be considered by CNN right-wing comedians. Now they're like, oh my God, there's so many. And you're like,
no, there's a bunch of like centrists with like libertarian or Bernie Sanders-y leanings.
Yeah,
and those that is blowing their minds.
But again, these people didn't change their opinions. You just decided recently that they are in fact right-wing because they didn't come along with you further left. They're they're not right-wing. Like Tim Dillon, I don't know, but like probably all those guys were like, yeah, I was just like every other left-wing comedian 10 years ago. Like when there was no right-wing comedians, it's just like was not a thing.
Yeah, they have some wacky viewpoints on that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like them just not understanding the entire kind of like the entire culture of like the purpose of this is not because even when they're saying the liberal Joe Rogan stuff, right, which has been their these guys are obsessed with that topic. How do we get a liberal Joe Rogan? It was like, see, the fact that you're trying to manufacture this means you see power and you're like, how do we get that power and then manipulate them into our thing? You go, the answer would be you'd have to stop wanting that.
Yeah, you have to stop wanting that. You have to be not dishonest constantly.
But they can't because they see, they're like, they keep seeing a thing as how do I use this?
Yeah.
And you go, well, you don't use it. You're like, it's like, how do I have a friend? It's like, people that are like networking and they're like, hey, how do I become friends with that guy so I can get him to put me on his thing? And we'll be like, sure, some people can be really good at manipulating, but you go, the better answer is that you actually make actual friends with people.
Yeah.
And you go, the goal of like every interaction you have with people wasn't to get something immediately.
I'm sure these people like less CNN or whatever, like, how much ad spend do we have to do to like get a left-wing Joe Rogan? Like, what does that look like?
They think they can manipulate the world.
But how many ads do we need to buy? And you're like, it doesn't work that way.
And I think when they controlled all the institutions, they probably could manipulate the world a little better. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Maybe I think, and they're having a really hard time with it. We can't just buy our way out of this.
No, you can't. I mean, again, they were this legacy thing that was just like in place, and it was a fucking cash cow, and it worked for a while.
And it even works less bad to like bring someone on and try to scold them when the person's bigger than you.
Yeah.
Because if you bring someone on that like has 10 times your following and then try to give them a lecture, they're just like, okay, I won't do that again.
Yeah.
So, and no one else will talk to you either. I mean, why would they?
Tim Dillon made a good point where he's like, I asked Tim Walz and I asked all these people to be on my show and they said no.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're like, well, that's the start of it. Is like, Tim Dillon's popular from going on Rogan essentially. Like that's how he built his. So it's like go on these platforms and like kind of mine their audience.
But they can't because they have this intractable problem where they get in trouble for doing that.
Absolutely. I mean, it is,
and they want you, and they're trying to go on your platform to try to sell you on the rules of more rules.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to go into decentralized spaces and sell them on centralization, and then they get in trouble for even talking to you because their whole thing is like, I'm gonna have you on to talk to you about how people shouldn't have people like you on.
I know.
It's like kind of what their message is.
Yeah. It's been really fascinating watching Jake Tapper get fucking kind of more and more based. Do you see this podcast thing?
Tapper's been fucking funny. Get Tapper on the cast, man.
Dude, Tapper's been
ask your boy.
I'll ask him. The problem is he thinks this is a podcast about the show The Boys.
Would be even funnier. Even funnier.
He shows up. He loves.
Dude, he shows up like in the gear.
Yeah. He goes, so what season are we talking about this week? And you go, Jake, have a seat.
All right, Jake, would you rather suck one dick? And he goes, is that a question from one of the episodes?
Did you see the thing where he was on the podcast talking about his son or whatever?
That would be funny. We actually brought him on and just had a full conversation with the boys. Like we just go.
Yeah, we do it. Yeah. Like we go watch every episode.
We're like, hey, what's your favorite thing about Homelander?
Homelander. Remember season 3? Homelander.
Pretty sick, right?
Pretty sick. And he goes, yeah, I love Homelander.
Would you smash Starlight or not?
But you see that thing where he was talking about his kid or whatever?
Yes.
Or whatever. So basically he was like, he did a podcast essentially and then he did another one about it. But like he went on some left-wing podcast and they're asking him about his kid. And he's like, my kid's like, my kid doesn't have political opinions. It's like he's 15 years old. All he cares about is like World War II
and gaming.
And gaming and playing football. And they're like, I'm pretty sure he has some opinions, pal. World War II, you say?
It's not completely untrue.
Yeah, I mean, what's more common than like
depends what game he's playing.
Yeah, but also
check. You have to tell me what Discords he is in for the game.
Yeah. But also, it's like what's more common than a kid like going against their parents like politics kind of thing too. But he's like, yeah, my son wants to become a cop or whatever, and then they were like, oh, and they're basically like these left wing podcasts.
Does he live in New York?
I think he does live in New York. Maybe he lives.
That's why I'm saying you can get him on.
Yeah, I mean, I could text him.
Or is he gonna make you get him off to get him on?
I don't know. I'll do it. But anyways, but he's like, my kid wants to be a cop, and then they're just like, oh, so your kid's like racist?
Yeah.
And then he went on those other podcasts, and he's like,
I'm normal.
Yeah, but he's slowly starting.
He's like, I'm normal. I just had a bit of TDS.
Yeah, but he's slowly starting to realize, even though the Biden book is absolutely nonsense.
Tapper is a little late on.
He's all over the place.
Tapper's wiretap comes in about 60. It's like a carrier pigeon wiretap. It comes in late.
He's like one of those. He has like one of those satellites where it's like receiving like a fucking thing from like Mars, and you go, yeah, it takes 6 years to get here.
He's getting a lot of 2019 signals right now.
But basically, he's like, yeah, why are they calling fucking kids racist? He's like, this is why the Democrats are losing. You're like, just figuring this out now, Jake. Okay. All right. Well,
he's like, everything was about the boys. He's like, yeah, I was just hearing that people are calling Homelander like racist or something. Like, what is this?
Yeah, what is this? Like, I don't get it. It's a good dude.
Yeah, Tapper's 5 steps behind with his wiretaps.
Yeah, he's a little off.
But
the problem is he's in a position where he makes so much money where he's like, he can't really.
I guess he was just like a little isolated. Just go into that CNN building.
You're not isolated. You have to willfully be. You're like getting this fucking $10 million check.
You're right. It's a little generous to say that.
No, he's not isolated. He just knows who fucking pays him, and he knows what he's allowed to say and what he's not allowed to say.
Right, and now the window's opening up a little more over there in the lunch tables at CNN.
Well, because CNN is just like, we're so fucked being so far left wing, so they're now having all these like conservatives on. Like, they probably didn't have a single conservative on their
Do you think they had like a big party at CNN where they bring everyone in and they have like their mandates on the wall, like call everyone racist, Trump's the devil, and then he brings everyone and he's like, I have an announcement to make, and he rips one off the wall and everyone goes, yeah, we're free. We're free from the shackles.
Yeah. So
the white men have to take their like bands off their arms.
Yeah.
Freedom.
Finally.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's
the Tapmeister. But it also reminded me, the Tim Dillon interview kind of reminded me of like just period about art, because like it's, I use the pickup artist analogy, but it's sort of an art analogy in general, where I've kind of said a lot of times there's certain personalities that will never be that good at art stuff, because to do it you have to make so many wrong decisions in a row, like irrational, right?
Lot, yeah.
But I wasn't even saying you have to fail a lot. For you, smart guy, economics degree, for you to, instead of get a job, move to the city to do open mics for 6 years in a row was an irrational decision.
Absolutely.
So every step along the way is irrational.
Yeah.
I could be working on this, but instead I'm doing this. Okay, I'm going to go, spend a bunch of money to go to Vancouver. Remember, we went and did open mics for 2 weeks there. Like, all of those moves are like irrational. And so and there's more. It's not just life. It's the jokes you're making. Like, yes, the jokes, you have to kind of go down irrational pathways to get to something good. So you have to be irrational so much that it doesn't make sense to someone who can only see the world like that.
Sure.
It's like when you're talking to someone and you're talking about this, they go, how do you make money from that? You go, if you're saying that like at the beginning, you're so far removed from what it will take. It's like, the answer is that you need to do this for like 15 years somewhere along the way, and probably the quicker you stop thinking like that, probably the quicker you will.
Yeah.
Just the same way that like the quicker you stop thinking about like friendships, like what can I get from this person, probably the quicker that your friends would be willing to help you.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think it was the same thing was that like as soon as you can stop thinking that the purpose of this medium is to push a political viewpoint, the quicker that you'll probably have more success at it.
I mean, if that chick...
But then it becomes rendered useless to you, because the whole use is to push a political viewpoint.
Yeah, like if that chick got fired from CNN tomorrow, where she has like, a salaried job with benefits, and she's just like, I'm going to go start a podcast, she'll kill herself in 2 weeks. If she has to do that. Like if she's I'll just go start a podcast, and you go, I have 112 views on my episode. You're like,
right.
After 2 weeks, she's like, I used
to be on CNN's
YouTube channel.
But that girl specifically was just reminding me of a million people.
Yeah,
it wasn't anything totally crazy. Like I've had that. I've had conversations with those people a million times. They're just like, what? Did Joe Rogan, that guy, like transphobic?
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay.
Oh, the cage fighter?
Yeah. Just like so not even tapped into like what the world is.
Yeah. But it was an interesting thing though, because this is a point I make and a lot of people disagree with me, but she was talking about how she went to South Dakota or whatever and asking about like because they were talking about like the visas being revoked or whatever. And she's like, I was bringing this up to people in South Dakota and they're like, no idea what I'm talking about.
That may be true.
Yeah. Where it's just like, it is interesting because sometimes in our world, I have said this before, but like, you think everybody's like tapped into this stuff, and there's so many people who are just like, do not know what's going on. They care about their fucking job and their family. And
some of them might just be 2 years behind, but
maybe
they're tapped into the issues that affect them.
Yeah.
I agree with that. If you're living in there and you go, what doesn't affect you is, what the fuck's happening at Harvard.
Yeah, for sure.